So I wanted to discuss a little bit today about ISKCON and the woman guru issue. Apparently some of the women in ISKCON are trying to become voted in or certified by the governing body commission of ISKCON as gurus. Now, this whole process has been very strange from the beginning because Srila Prabhupada is a guru, for example, and they think that at a GBC meeting they can certify another person to be equal to Prabhupada. He's a guru, and Prabhupada is a guru, and Krishna is a guru. So they think at some meeting we can have a vote, and as a result of that vote, a person can be declared as an authorized representative of God, God's living spokesperson on earth. And this is all done by a 2/3 show of hands vote of the governing body commission members of ISKCON. But the first problem is that Srila Prabhupada did not appoint any guru successors, nor did he ever establish a system that gurus could be voted in by a vote of the governing body commission, nor does it make sense that a guru would be under the authority of a governing body. That's really not done in the Vaishnava history, that there's a council of people managing the guru. That is not the system. In any case, ISKCON has a lot of other issues, like, for example, Srila Prabhupada said he wanted farms and cows and restaurants and things like that for the devotees. Those projects have been pretty much put on hold. We don't see a lot of emphasis on that type of project. What we do see instead is a very small clique of the gurus monopolizing the properties of ISKCON, and they've emptied out the temples. There's a ghost town situation in many temples. There's not many people. The Sankirtan process has been virtually halted in many big cities. The book distribution is way down. Making devotees is way down. Everything is way down. So basically, the temples have been diminished, the book distribution diminished, and the most important thing Prabhupada wanted just before he departed was for ISKCON to make farms. That has not been done. So why is the priority to make women gurus now? Why is this now all of a sudden a big important issue? Is this really going to expand dramatically if we make a few women into gurus in ISKCON? It doesn't seem likely. It doesn't seem like this is going to all of a sudden attract a whole bunch of new people and regenerate the society. So it just seems like more shuffling around of the same old problems. We have problems with men gurus who are deviating and falling down, and if we make women into gurus, what is going to stop them from deviating and falling down and having the same problems? Now, the next problem is a conditioned soul cannot be a Diksha guru and absorb the sins of other beings. That is not possible. And Prabhupada gives the example that a drowning man cannot save another drowning man. He will go in to save the other drowning person and he will drown as well. So this is what happens when a conditioned soul tries to take the post of a Diksha guru. He begins to absorb the sins of his followers. And when that happens, he can become sick or fall down or both. And as we see, a number of these so-called gurus have died prematurely. And sometimes they've died in a lot of pain and difficulty, because Prabhupada also says a person who absorbs sins without authority will have to suffer. So they have to suffer. And of course they have to suffer in their next life as well, because Prabhupada says false acharyas go to the lowest regions of the universe. And that is one of the things that takes them to the lower regions. They have accumulated the sins of followers, and they take those sins with them into their future life. And those sins drag them down, take them down to a lower destination. They're not qualified to burn off those sins. They can't do that. Prabhupada says that a pure devotee has Brahmana Tejas, which means fire, and therefore the sins of his followers don't really affect or accumulate on that pure devotee. He's protected by this fire, but a neophyte, he will be overwhelmed. This is something that very few devotees ever discuss or acknowledge in and around ISKCON. So a lot of the men have fallen down and gotten sick and died prematurely from taking sins, and people don't seem to think that's a big problem, when in fact it's a major, major problem. It is a major problem. They're falling down, creating scandals. That's a big problem. They're getting sick. That is a big problem and a big expense, and they're dying. And meanwhile, when all this is going on, they're having a very hard time actually conducting the preaching because they're overwhelmed with all these other problems. So that, if that's happening to the men, that's certainly going to happen also to the women. The women gurus will have the same difficulty. They cannot absorb the sins of their followers. Anyway, one of the people who is leading the woman guru issue is Malati, and she had a meeting recently in New Vrindavan with Devamrita. Wait a minute, Devamrita is a person who has preached at New Vrindavan that women are like toilets. He says women are like private or public toilets. What is that? Why is this person allowed to even preach at all in and around ISKCON? And why is he brought in as an authority on the issue of making women gurus? Why is this person at the meeting and being part of the committee to determine if women should be gurus or not gurus? He is not qualified to speak about the issue of women in any capacity. Malati herself left ISKCON and followed Prithu Putra, who was a kind of Satan-worshipping type guy. And he got into all kinds of problems in New York City with his Satan-worshipping thing, including problems with the police. But Malati was making illustrations for his satanic literature, making little Satans and stuff like that, little drawings for his literature. So clearly she doesn't have a very good grasp on Krishna consciousness, or she would not have fallen into this situation. Now, as for Prithu Putra, he apparently or allegedly said that Prabhupada had been poisoned, and that is the reason he had to leave ISKCON. He left ISKCON himself. So if Malati and Prithu Putra had to leave ISKCON because they can't tolerate working with these living gurus, why would they participate again? Why would they go back? Why would Malati go back and try to revive getting people enthused to work with these living gurus when she herself had to leave because she couldn't tolerate working with them, at least at one point? So that's a problem, that Malati has all kinds of very difficult things going on in her very recent past, which means she should not be made into a guru. In fact, you could say, due to her Satan worshipping program promoting with Prithu Putra, that she is one of the last people on earth who should be made into a guru. She has a lot of, let's say, modes of ignorance issues going on in her mentality. Another woman candidate is Urmila, and Urmila has been supposedly helping the education department of ISKCON. Wait a minute, there's been a lot of child molesting going on, and where were the education department leaders when all this molesting was going on? That's the question. And I remember writing to Urmila many, many years ago and trying to tell her about the molesting issue and the abuse issue in the schools, and she just sent a letter back to me, don't send me any more of your trash literature. So she didn't want to hear our side of the story, and our side of the story is that there is a problem in these schools. So again, she is another candidate who is not qualified to be given the post of guru just because she doesn't have very good discrimination. And she appears to be very much a part of the corruption of the ISKCON society. So, again, here's the problem. Why are these people being brought in as potential woman gurus? Now, Bhakti Vikas Swami, to his credit, he at least tried to oppose this outcropping of the woman guru issue. But unfortunately, he still doesn't understand that the GBC has no authority to vote in men or woman gurus. He doesn't address the root issue. The conditioned souls are not qualified to be gurus, whether it's a woman guru or whether it's himself being voted into their system or whatever it is. Conditioned souls are not qualified to be gurus. That's all there is to it. Prabhupada says that the guru must be a resident of Krishna Loka. He must be an Uttama Adhikari. He must be a pure devotee. And Prabhupada says if someone attempts to be guru without authority, he goes to hell and the followers go to hell with him. It's the blind leading the blind. That is what Prabhupada says. You cannot expect that people are going to put their sins onto somebody like Jayatirath. Jayatirath is taking drugs, taking LSD, all kinds of things, and he's having illicit sex with at least one follower, maybe more. And how is he going to take the sins of other people? He can't absorb his own sins. So Bhakti Vikas Swami has not understood the root issue, that conditioned souls are not gurus, whether woman gurus, men gurus, dog guru, cat guru, or any other kind of guru. It doesn't matter. The body is not the problem. The problem is a conditioned soul cannot be a guru, and they just don't get that. So we thought that should be emphasized, that there's been a problem with, let's say, a loose standard of making gurus in ISKCON. And now the women are just being sucked into that process. Now, Hridayananda has started the Krishna West program, which again is considered as a very liberal program. Let's make everything very liberal and very cheapened down. So we believe he is part of this whole agenda of, let's say, quote-unquote, westernizing ISKCON and making women gurus, making men gurus who are not qualified, bringing in all kinds of Western standards into ISKCON, which Prabhupada did not approve of, and so on and so forth. Now, at the time of Lord Chaitanya, only those persons who had correct spiritual understanding were allowed into his room. He had a private room, kirtan, at different times, with his intimate followers, and people who didn't understand things properly were not allowed into the room. You had to understand certain points and agree to certain points before you would be allowed into the association of Lord Chaitanya. And one of those things is that Krishna is pure. Krishna is pure, and therefore his successor is pure. So unless you agree to that, that's like the bare minimum standard, you're not allowed into Lord Chaitanya's room. You have to know that. Well, in ISKCON, a lot of women knew that. They knew Krishna's pure, his successor has to be pure, and that's why they had to be driven out of ISKCON, because they had knowledge, they had jnana, they understood Krishna's pure, his successor is pure, and the GBC saying, no, the successors to Krishna are deviants and pornographic swamis and people having illicit sex, people drinking vodka. That's what a pure devotee is. That's what a guru is. And the woman knew that was wrong. Now, I think also when I first started protesting this whole GBC guru program in the first place, many women came and told me all kinds of things that were going on in ISKCON that were deviations. So they were very aware of deviations of the leadership. They were more aware in many cases than most of the men or many of the men. They would come and tell me this is wrong, that's wrong. And the men, as a group, some of them, of course, came and told me different things, but we had a lot more women than men coming. What does that mean? It means the women were more conscious that these things are deviations going on in ISKCON. So the women were cut out. That's what happened. But never mind devotee women or ISKCON women, even normal women, understood that there was big deviations going on. For example, I was interviewed by a television news lady, and she said, I want to show you a film that I took at New Vrindavan. She took a film of Kirtanananda covered with the hands of little boys. And she said, is this man a sexual predator or not? And I said, well, he is. And she says, well, thank goodness you're telling me that. You're the only person in this movement who told me that. I've interviewed hundreds of people. Nobody agreed with me that this guy is a sexual predator, including the leaders. So how is it that some ordinary woman, a so-called karmi woman, can understand right away what is the problem in ISKCON, and all these men cannot? So even an ordinary woman can surpass these ISKCON men very easily in understanding certain aspects of spiritual life. And she also said, if this was going on in my church, some guy was sitting on a big throne, covered with the hands of little boys, dressed in silk robes, she would personally go up and pull that man off of that seat. She would not allow that. So that means she has not only more intelligence than many men, she has more, let's say, man power, man fighting power. She wants to fight deviation. She doesn't want to allow that in her church. And I believe her. I believe she would not have allowed that in her church. If she saw that going on in her church, she would be the first in line to go up and pull that down. And she said also, I don't care if I would be killed. I would not allow that in my church. So then she further went on and asked, well, what about your Bhagavad Gita? Isn't your Bhagavad Gita about fighting evil people? Why aren't people fighting? Where are the people who are fighting the deviations? Have they understood the Bhagavad Gita? So again, understand, this is a normal woman off the street, and she has a greater understanding of Bhagavad Gita than most of the men in ISKCON, an ordinary woman. So we discredit women to our peril when women have superior understanding in many cases, and even superior understanding of what needs to be done. You need to pull this down. You can't allow this. You have to stop this. So that is what a woman would do. Now, another woman was a reporter for the Moundsville Intelligencer. She was friends with me, and she was exposing the whole New Vrindavan thing, and she said she got run off the road by gangsters in a van. Okay, obviously, New Vrindavan people ran her off the road. And she said, you know what, they want to stop me, but I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go after these people. So again, just look what's going on. We have all these men in ISKCON. As soon as there's a problem, they run away and hide in the ditch somewhere. She gets run off the road into the ditch, and she says, I am not going to stop, because she has a greater understanding of fighting for justice than a lot of men. So this has been severely misunderstood in the ISKCON situation. Now, one of the reasons for having this woman guru program, supposedly, is that this will make women in ISKCON feel more included in the governing of the society, and that women have a place, finally, in the management of ISKCON. But what if these women are compromisers with all of the troublemakers in the first place? What good will that do for the woman as a class? These women, who are the prospective gurus, are women who have gone along with all the corruption going on in ISKCON. They're not going to help the woman as a class. They're not going to elevate the woman as a class. Simultaneously, they're not qualified to be gurus. They're going along with this guru voting thing, making it look like the concocted process of making gurus by vote is valid and is a good idea. It doesn't work. You cannot vote conditioned souls as gurus. They should not be trying to impose this deviation on the society. But at the same time, what kind of men are they bringing into the committee? They got a committee to help them make woman gurus, and they bring in a guy who says woman. He lectures, actually, publicly, that women are private or public toilets. What kind of guy are they bringing into their committee? This is one of the guys who has alienated the woman in the first place, who has caused all kinds of mayhem and problems for women. So what Sulochana felt is that the men of ISKCON have compromised with what he called the gay mafia, the gay saffron mafia. And he felt that a lot of the leaders had a tendency to be homosexuals, and the other men in ISKCON had a tendency to be submissive to those leaders who were of that ilk or of that tendency. And this was one of the problems. And I had even a friend who verified this. He was a homosexual man, and he died of AIDS some years ago. But he said that some homosexual men are bitter and envious towards women because women are competition for the gay men. So that is why they say insulting things like women are toilets and this type of thing, because they're envious of women as a class. Now, if the envious of women as a class group overtakes the agenda of a religion, then what are you going to have? You're going to have a problem where women are going to be alienated, and the men are not going to try to accommodate the woman, especially not to a prominent situation. So that has been going on, and that, I believe, is one of the reasons the women have been suppressed. And the people who say women are toilets are being forwarded and being promoted. That agenda is being promoted. So I don't believe that's an accident. Now, one of the ladies here who pointed to problems in ISKCON in the early 1980s, she was removed from ISKCON. She was a pujari who was worshiping Krishna here. And she told me, she said, I've lost my will to live. She was so devastated that these men, quote unquote, would kick her out and stop her from serving the deity. So she said she lost her will to live, and then 1 year later she was dying. She had terminal cancer, and I went to the hospital and talked to her. And she looked at me, after she had been unconscious for quite some time, and she says, oh, Pranjan, you came, and she smiled, and we kind of connected there. She knew that I knew that she was checking out. She was leaving. She couldn't tolerate not being able to serve Krishna. She could not live in that situation. So imagine that this has happened to many women, maybe hundreds of women, maybe thousands of women. They become devastated by this situation. So I do believe there's some very heavy karmic reaction which will come to the men who created this situation, the so-called men who created these problems. Now, in addition to problems that the women were experiencing, many of the children were having a problem because there was a pedophile problem going on. And again, a lot of these quote-unquote men of ISKCON did not deal with and handle that situation well because they're weak. So are they weaker than women? It seems to be that is the case. A lot of women would not tolerate molestation of children, but a lot of these men, quote-unquote, did. So I don't believe that men or woman body is necessarily the qualification for having realization and having discrimination. Now, if we look at the gopis are the main servants of Krishna. They're females, they're women. It doesn't matter if they're women, they have a higher realization of Krishna. They have more consciousness of Krishna. They are more conscious of reality. They're more conscious of the absolute truth than men as a class. And the same thing with Mother Yasoda. Mother Yasoda is more elevated than most of the men because she's more conscious of Krishna. She's more Krishna consciousness. So that is the level of reality that we have to come to. We have to come to the plane of being Krishna conscious. And it doesn't matter if we're women or men bodies. That has to be given up. That is bodily identification. We have to identify with being servants of Krishna. We may be gopis, we might be a flute, we might be Krishna's shoes, we might be a flower, we might be a bumblebee. We have to get out of this whole concept that we are men and women, especially in the material world. in this dimension. It's very, very limiting, and it prohibits us from, moving on to a higher platform. Now, Sulochan said, overall, there's an anti-woman, anti-children, anti-family, and let's say pro-homosexual mentality going on, especially in the management group of ISKCON. So I'm not saying that any one or all of them or some of them are homosexuals necessarily, but there is an agenda, there is a tendency, there's a trend and a tendency to be supporting a sort of misogynistic, anti-female, anti-children, anti-family process, which is going on in ISKCON. And what the underlying roots of that are, anyone can speculate. But it doesn't look good. It has not been inclusive to women. And because of that, ISKCON has suffered and will continue to suffer until this issue is more resolved. And making women into gurus is simply throwing gasoline on the fire. This is going to create another whole set of problems. It's not going to fix anything. Now, I wanted to make one last point, that exploiting women is not something that we find many homosexuals or hardly any homosexuals doing. It's not something that's common in their group. Most of the exploiting of women that goes on is by heterosexuals who are using women for prostitutes or for exploitation or for working in their factory or so many other things like that. That is another thing. But I'm just saying that there seems to be some connection to some of the exploiting mentality problem here to a misogynistic thing, and some of these people are homosexuals, and some of my homosexual friends verified to me they think these people are against women, including some devotee homosexuals who told me the same basic thing. So it's a problem. We have to change the whole dynamic of ISKCON to make it pro-woman, pro-family, pro-children, and that's just the way it's got to be if we're going to have a society. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Haribol.